As wild as her dreams are, she's gonna achieve much more than that. I was left with this decision of continuing on what I had always thought was my passion, or taking over my family legacy. I watched both my parents really build their businesses. I watched both businesses collapse. I never had gone into any fashion school, any business school. I was 22 years old. I came in, and I won't lie, I let everybody go, and I had to start from scratch. And so the first 5 years were very, very hard.
I think people look at successful people and they think that it's just overnight. And you're like, 9 years of building, and now my 10th year is where I'm actually finally achieving it. And nobody thinks it's gonna take that long.
Leadership, especially, but entrepreneurship, it's about resilience. And now looking back and going through those challenges, that's the thing I'm most proud of.
Just
not to quit. You have to survive it. And this is definitely not something that I've ever shared.
If you've been enjoying Inspire to Lead and want to experience this community in person, JWE is hosting our annual conference on April 27th in Newark, New Jersey. This is where Jewish women in business come to dream bigger, reach higher, and power each other forward. As a thank you to our listeners, you can use the code PODCAST for $10 off your ticket. All right, let's jump into today's conversation. Welcome to Inspire to Lead. We'd like to thank our friends at Roth & Co., innovators in accounting and business advisory, for making this conversation possible. We're coming to you from Miami. I'm your host, Talia Mashiach. Today, I'm joined by Malka Katzav, owner of Big Drop. Welcome, Malka. I'm so excited to have you in this beautiful, beautiful home in sunny Miami.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh my gosh, I am like, I don't know, I was so excited to meet you, but I was also so excited to get away from the bitter cold in Chicago. And I was like, yes, you know what? I'm out to Miami. Perfect timing.
Miami is a perfect excuse for anybody in the cold during this time. It's just a great little injection. Sun, happiness, and just easygoing lifestyle.
This hardest thing I had was trying to pick out my outfit, which I know like is everything we're going to talk about, but you look amazing. And so let's just start. Tell us a little bit about you. Tell us about your career.
Yeah, so my name is Malka. I am 32 years old. I was born and raised in the heart of New York City in Soho, and I have lived there my whole life. I am an only child of my two parents, and I am first gen on both sides. So both my parents immigrated here. My father immigrated from Israel in the late 80s, and then my mother immigrated from Brazil actually around the same time, and she went to FIT. And over the years through the industry, they met each other, and now we're here.
Tell us a little bit about Big Drop.
So Big Drop started 35 years ago. We actually just celebrated our 35th anniversary last year, which was very, very special, very emotional. And my dad started in 1990. It actually started when he immigrated from Israel. He had no connections, didn't even speak English. He did not come from, money or an affluent family, and he just knew that he wanted to see the world and he wanted to build something. And so he came to New York. He knew one friend, and that friend had an uncle who had an overstock warehouse. And so they started to take that overstock goods. They would put it in the studio apartment on the weekdays, and on the weekends and at night they would go out, promote kind of like the sample sale, and people would come into their studio apartment and shop during the day. And then eventually, within less than a year, it kind of just evolved into a brick and mortar.
Is that what the name comes from? Because they were like dropping, because I know people, even just telling people that I was going to interview you, the biggest thing was, can you please ask what the name is?
It's so funny. Everybody asks. It's actually, my dad was a surfer. A lot of Israelis are surfers growing up. And so my dad loved surfing his whole life. And around that time, there was a documentary that came out. This is what he tells me.
Yeah.
There's a documentary that came out of this really, really big wave that hit Hawaii at that time. And it was called the Big Drop. And I think they were watching the show, the movie one day, and they were like, this is the name, this speaks to me. And so I think also definitely the language barrier probably helped in making that selection, not really knowing what it could mean. But yeah, that's how they started, and that's how the name came.
So you grew up in a home of an entrepreneur. So how did that influence sort of how you were thinking about your career at that time?
I think it has so much impact in my life, and growing up, I think especially now in the last 5 to 10 years, I really realized how special it is to not only grow up in a household with one entrepreneur, but I grew up in a household with two entrepreneurs. And everybody from both sides of my family are all entrepreneurs. And so growing up with that, it really instilled from a very young age a sense of hunger for just more, and always working to continue to improve, resiliency. I watched both my parents really build their businesses. I watched both businesses collapse, and I watched both of them survive in their own way and really make it through. And I think having that example shows you that you really can achieve anything you set your mind to. And that, I think, was really the motto my dad instilled in me from such a young age. You want to be an astronaut? You can do it. You have to believe that you can do it, and you will get there, and Hashem will bring you into that direction. And so I think having that just really instilled this innate responsibility, but this drive in me of always wanting to achieve more and have an impact also on the outer world.
And I know we're here today to talk about Big Drop, but I'm really interested that I know your father started Big Drop, but you mentioned that your mother also had a business. So I'm just curious what it was.
So my mom went to FIT for college. She graduated from with a degree in fashion design. And she is truly so talented. She made my bat mitzvah dress, she made my wedding dress, she made my husband's wedding suit as well. She does custom tailoring. So she does a lot of bridal, a lot of suiting, shirting. That's kind of what she specializes in. And she had her business, and she had a brick-and-mortar for 30 years. She's actually part of the CFDA. And then during COVID, she was like, hey, this is a sign. My career is, done here. And so she closed her store at that time as well. She closed it a couple months before we closed our New York store, which was our headquarters. And she moved to Connecticut with her husband.
Wow. Okay. So this is making a lot of sense because you have your fashion and design from your mom's side, and then you've got the retail, the business from your dad. But Big Drop wasn't always the store it is today. And so I would, first of all, love to hear about the store. And I want to talk because a lot of people really struggle, especially, and we'll talk about kind of COVID, but they struggle. There's a lot of people listening that have retail, and it's like, oh, is retail dying? What are people doing to actually make retail work? So I really want to hear about the store. We'll go back afterwards and talk about how you got to where it is, but tell me about the store. What makes it unique, and how have you been able to make it so successful?
It really comes down to what are we looking to provide the client, right? Yes, we offer clothing, and yes, that is the product or the goods that we carry, but what are we really looking to provide the client? And funny enough, I never thought I would be in fashion. I never thought I would take over either of my parents' businesses. I was really going to go into education and into creating learning systems and textbooks, but I felt like there was such an opportunity in retail, especially in the last, I would even say 15 years, right? Where you do not have that experience that we used to get when we were shopping. It's no longer an activity that women do on a weekend with their girlfriends, with your mom, your sisters, your cousins. People come and visit you in New York. It used to be you go out for brunch and then you walk around Soho or your desired area. You do some sightseeing, you do some shopping, and you would really go to specialty boutiques like ours to find the pieces you cannot find anywhere else and to really get that customer service experience. At the end of the day, it's really not what we sell, it's how we make these women feel. And that's the business that we're in. And so when I took over the business 10 years ago, I was 22 years old. I took over at that time, a 25-year-old business. And like I said, I never had the interest to go into fashion or go into retail, but I saw that there was such an opportunity there. And that's what I love to do. I love to celebrate people. I think that's what it is. I love to celebrate you, whoever you are, whatever it is that you bring to this world. There's so much to celebrate. And I think there's so much that happens in the world, in current events, and just we as women, we as Jews also, there's just so much that we go up against every day that it's so easy to forget the magic of yourself, like the beauty of yourself. And if that's something that we can provide at Big Drop when you come in and you are looking, yes, to buy something, but you can walk away with much more than what you're purchasing in that shopping bag, that's when I know we've achieved what we're here to do. And I can confidently say that in these last few years, we are really achieving that.
So that sounds like the magic sauce. And if you were to kind of break that down practically, and you were sharing with somebody who's in retail right now and who has a store and saying, okay, I love the vision and it's amazing and it makes sense why it's so successful and so unique, but how practically could they take like a standard retail store and bring that magic that you have into their store?
I think it's all about energy. I really do. And I'm so grateful that I'm able to find people for our team that understand the power of that and understand the significance of it and importance. But I'm also even more grateful that we're able to achieve this in a bigger scale, right? And so not just me being that main person that you can come in and Malka's going to give you that experience. No, we have transcended that to everybody on our team, no matter how junior you are, no matter how new you are. Lily is a great example of somebody who has really echoed that and leads by example for the rest of the team. And the clients feel it when they walk in. And I think for us, the reason why now looking back at it, it's easy for us to get there is because yes, we are retail, and yes, of course, we are sales driven. But the motto has never been, and the intention has never been, make the sale, close the sale. It has always been, what are you giving this client? What are we providing this client? How are you making her feel? We want to be able to show women that you can dress for your body type and still look and feel amazing. And when you dress for your body type and your lifestyle and you're comfortable in what you feel, these women light up. I mean, even myself, like sometimes I do this all day long. I do the buying with Lily. We know what we're buying. And sometimes our social media manager will be like, Malka, put this on. I'm like, I would never put this on. And I put it on and I'm like, wow, this is, it's just a natural feeling that any woman gets when you feel good and you look yourself in the mirror. It's almost like you're seeing yourself again in that light and in that magic, right? And so it's really a mindset. It's a matter of mindset and it's a matter of energy. And what are you looking to achieve? I always tell the girls, do not go in with the intention of what am I yielding out of this sale? Go in with the intention of what relationship you're starting here and what you're building. And with that, it's just a different energy on our sales floor. There's no...
Well, let me ask you a little bit about that, because I think people yeah, that sounds amazing, but how do I attract and train people to work in my store that are like that?
I think my number one tip that I would say, and this is definitely not something that I've ever shared, if you are in retail or if you own a sales business, find another way where commission is not individual, sales are not tracked individually, and that there is more of a team
incentive.
Like a team, thank you. There's more of a team incentive and teamwork in order to get to the goals. You need each other to hit your goals. Nothing in our store is done individually. You cannot get your individual commission unless the store hits it as a team.
So I love that, and that is actually a major tip that I give to anybody who asks me advice in any type of sales team, is that, and I don't know if you're willing to share, but one of the tips I've given in the past is, okay, there's a team goal, and you could break that into individual goals, but it's a team goal. But you have to, in order for you to get the commission, you have to hit your personal goal, and then there's the team goal. And if the team goal hits, but you won't hit yours, so like those get combined in a formula.
Have you worked on Big Drop before? I think you read the handbook, that verbatim. That's exactly how we do it. You have a team goal, you have an individual goal, but in order for the individual to get paid out on their goal, even if they've hit it, surpassed it, the team has to hit theirs first.
And you know what? That creates a behavior in which you're incented to help your colleagues, right? You're like, oh, no problem, I'll take that one, and if someone's behind, it also creates. Do you guys, what about the transparency? Are you doing like weekly, here's where we're at, monthly? Like, talk a little bit about that energy that pumps everyone up, because I really think this is one of the biggest challenges that people who own retail stores struggle with.
100%, and I think it's so funny because the way that we do our commission structure, we've done it this way for 30 years. I think even maybe 32 years, right? And every other retailer I've ever spoken to, they do it in such an outdated way where everything is individual. You're a salesperson, this is your sales, and it just doesn't incentivize the salesperson not only to help your teammate out, but it also incentivizes them in a different way with the customers that are in the store. It's really, they forget about the sales and the sales goal, and it's really what relationship can I build with this client? What is this client coming in? What does she actually need from me besides the product, right? So many women come in and they need an ear to listen to their problems. They need a shoulder to cry on. They need a boost of confidence. They need just a little spark, a little magic, a little pick-me-up during the day. And you walk into Big Drop, first of all, the ceilings are lime green, the fitting room doors are bright pink, and then everything in the store is bright colors. So it's so hard to walk in and not have this just like boost of serotonin. And then it is followed up with every single person that you have a touch point with in our store truly is just such an amazing human being and an amazing woman that really just wants to show you the light. Like,
I love it. And I guess I would just try to summarize it is that you created a culture in which the customer has a relationship with the brand, 100%. Right? It's not just, it's a relationship. And that's amazing. And I think we'll talk about all the different ways you've created that relationship. And then it's looking at it for the longer term. It's not just, here's the one sale, you're coming in, you're going out. And I think that could apply to so many other businesses, 100%. Is when you're thinking about it as a relationship. I think one of the hardest things though, and that is, I totally agree with you, and that is exactly how I think successful businesses need to operate. Where I think it's hard is how to implement it. And I think there's certain leadership skills that need to come from the top down that really create the culture. And then one of the things, just the other day, I was talking with, like, how I'm struggling with hiring. I think everyone kind of struggles with hiring.
Same.
So
I can give you no points on that.
Right. So one of my advice to her was, and this has worked so well for me, and I've given it to a lot of people, so I'll give it to you as well, yes. Is you always have people that were really successful in your company, and then you have people that weren't successful. I said, start by making a list of all the people, what are the attributes, what are the unique qualities about the people that were really successful, and what are the qualities about the people that weren't successful? And you start to see a trend. And then you start
think about them right now.
Right, and you start to see a trend, and then you sort of say, this is like our culture points, meaning they have to be self-starters, they have to be passionate, they have to be team-oriented, no drama, whatever those words may be, and they can't be X, Y, Z. And then a lot of times people, when they're doing hiring, they're hiring for skill. What experience did you have? You know, they're not also matching in the culture point. So when you also create your interview questions and reference questions for how you can figure out if they fit your culture, that's when the hiring completely changes. And so you're figuring out culture fit and skill fit. And so that would be like my advice, and being able to do that and make sure people are successful. And then I would follow that with, how are you onboarding them? How are you teaching them about the importance of your culture? What structure do you have? And most important, how do you attract the people? So you might come up with this list of all these things that you want, but then the next thing is, yeah, but those type of people don't want to work here. Well, then you have to reflect inwards. So it sounds like, and I'd love to hear that you've created an environment that it's like super cool to work for you, to work with you. Talk a little bit about your own leadership skills and what you know about yourself and what you've evolved. Like, you were young when you took this over. What has been some of the lessons that helped you to kind of grow yourself into this role?
I think number one is hire the right people so you don't need to micromanage. Yeah. I think that was my biggest shift from my first 5 years of taking over my business. I took over in 2015 when I graduated, to the last 5 years. So it's kind of like pre-COVID, post-COVID. And that was also, my first 5 years were in New York, and my most recent 5 years have been here in Miami. So it was a completely different setup, different team, different environment, and it's very much a different culture, New York to Miami. And also now post-COVID, the world is just different, right? And so number one is hiring so that you don't have to micromanage. Invest in the people that you are bringing onto your team so that it allows you to do what you can do and what no one else can do for you. That's not.
What were the key things that helped you to learn that kind of in your not in your first 5 years to now these current 5 years?
I think one of them honestly has to do with understanding the investment in that. And when I think so many business owners, especially myself, and I come from Big Drop, I come from my dad, who is very, very tight with everything, right? He was surviving his whole life and he was doing whatever. It's not that he woke up one day and was like, I want to be in fashion, So he was doing what
I need to put food on the table for my family.
Exactly. Yeah. And so him and I see things very differently. And when I first started, he was very strict on investing in payroll. right? Like I think for a lot of business owners, when you're a small business, it's so hard to put out a full salary and you don't know what's going to happen from that, right? And it's people that have experience. It's a big investment, right? And to find multiple of those for all the roles, but once you shift the mindset and you are willing to invest, the results that you get and the return that you get is tenfold. Because instead of having to micromanage, or instead of having to worry about who's going to call out or who's going to make this mistake, or I need to show them how to hang this on a hanger, it's like you don't deal with that anymore. You can now deal with growing the business, right? Like growth strategies, client relationships, merchandising, opening different stores, our digital strategy. There's just so much opportunity there. And so that biggest mindset and that shift in really investing in our people and hiring the right people is honestly one of the biggest tips that I would also give. You do not end up saving money. You don't.
One of the things that I found so unique about your story is that I love that you've figured out that the relationship with the client is what's the key to success, but you've been able to create that feeling both in the physical retail store with a digital presence, and also like creating yourself associated with your brand. And that's like incredibly powerful. So can you talk a little bit about that? And was that something you realized in your first 5 years in Soho, or was that something that evolved for you later on and you realized, if I'm going to make this successful, I need to be able to do this? Did you learn it from someone? Tell us a little bit about that.
It's definitely something that we do feel on the inside internally, especially in the last year. We've really seen not even the growth, which has been tremendous, but really seeing how all the touch points connect and really represent that in-store experience that we're known for. Specialty boutiques, retail in general, has had such a shift in the last few decades, especially in the last 2 decades, I would say even. Soho used to always be specialty boutiques. In the early 10s, it changed into denim stores, and now it's full luxury. So it's a completely different environment, and even with Miami, with a different audience here, I think it naturally, everything happens organically. But I think what we realized was we are a specialty boutique. And it took me years to figure this out. We are a specialty boutique and we stand on our own. And so looking at what a Revolve is doing or a Saks is doing, it doesn't really make sense because we are not that, and our customer is not looking for that from us. You can do these email blasts and we started doing them 2 years ago, these editorial shoots. I remember we walked into one market, which is where we go for buying, and every single showroom that we walked into, the first thing that they would say, oh my God, your Instagram is amazing. The content is phenomenal. This was a year ago. So good. How are you doing? And then me and my social media manager would be like, oh my God, amazing. Which ones? Because we always like to know. We like to hear, what did you like about it? What did you not? And they would scroll until they got to a video of either myself or anyone from my team. Scroll. And we're like, that's what you like? Yeah, this is what I remember. It would be posted like 4 months ago. I'm like, what about all of this? They could care less. And that market weekend, this was September of 2024, we came back and we said, okay, no more, it's us. It's myself, Bianca, who's our social media manager, Lily, who handles all of our VIP clients. She's the face of the brand. When you walk into the store, everybody knows Lily, everyone comes in for her. And she's also represents us on the back end with all of our buying and all of our designers and the brands that we carry. And so once we shifted into that and really, we took our own lessons, right, and our own motto of shining the light on our clients and showing them their power, we realized that we now need to see our own power and our own magic that we can bring. And once we shifted into that and we really started to create content that was, everything that you see is organic. Nothing is acting, nothing is redone. It's all naturally what happens. And it was when we took exactly what is happening in the store, as raw as it is, as natural as it is, as organic, as chaotic as it is, capture that and put that online.
So I'll tell you what's coming to my mind as I'm listening to this story, and I'm thinking about, even for myself in my own companies, we don't always do a great job understanding why our clients like to buy from us, or what they value in us. And even in this, it sounds like it was almost, you happen to run into them, like in this case it was, well, what's working, right? What's working on your social? What do we love? And it was like, you happen to go to the market and they happen to show you and they happen to scroll, and that's how you learned and that's how you realized and that's how you were able to change. But I think coming from this is like, if business owners could be more proactive to really go out and how often do people go out and ask anyone, what did you like? I know there's the A/B testing out there, fine, but really to your good clients, how often are you saying, what do you like about us? Why did you buy from us? You know, it's like the basic, one of the questions. I have a software company, so one of the things I always want my team to ask every single time they meet like quarterly with a client is, okay, if you give us a score 1 through 10, what would that score be? And often it's like an 8 or a 9. And I said, okay, don't leave it there. Ask the specific question, what would it take for us to be a 10? What you can learn from that is like phenomenal, because even though they might love you, there's still like there's the tidbits of like what you could get more. And so just engaging and finding unique ways to engage and listen, I think those who do that wind up with huge shifts, like, oh wait, once my client told me this, or once we realized that, that's when things blew up. So I think that's like an incredible story. So I want to talk about, like, take us back a little bit into you stepping into the business, because you shared a little bit that you were planning to go into education, and you know, your father had the business. So how did you shift from, I was going to go into education and then I decided to take over the business?
So this is always an emotional question for me. I graduated college and I had planned to go to Berkeley to teach. I was going to be a teaching assistant. For my senior thesis, I had created a learning platform, which basically you could apply to any subject. I had applied it to languages because that's my passion. I speak 5 languages fluently. And I applied it to Italian, and it revolutionized the learning system and the textbook system. So instead of having one textbook from one publisher like McGraw-Hill, Italian level 1, you had 4 versions of that same level. And every version was different depending on your learning style. And that was what I was really passionate about. And I always thought that that's what I was going to go into since I was very young. I really worked so hard on my thesis. We were going to publish it. And my parents were divorced since I was 4. I was an only child at the time. And my dad was like, okay, amazing. Like, you're graduated, you're set, you have a plan. I'm going to close up shop and I'm going back home to Israel. And it was in that moment where I was left with this decision, or this choice to make, of either taking over, my family legacy, or continuing on what I had always thought was my passion. And it was in that moment that I realized that I had never known my life without Big Drop. And I think as a divorced child and an only child, it was the only constant I had in my whole life. And it was my home. When I had my first heartbreak, it's where I would run to my dad in the office, or the girls that would manage the store, they would always help me for my dances when I was in middle school, elementary school. Like, that was my home. And so picturing life without Big Drop, it was something that was so strange for me, and it was something that really didn't sit well with me, and it was such an easy decision to make. And so I told my dad I would take over, which he was just as shocked as I was. So was my mother. And he said, okay, but if you're going to take over, you're going to take over. Like, I'm retired. I don't want to do this anymore. I gave you everything, your beautiful life, and now I have enough to go home and also have a beautiful life at home. And I was like, okay. And so the first 5 years were very, very hard. I won't lie, they were extremely hard. I was 22 years old. I never had gone into any fashion school, any business school, anything like that, which is so fine. But I also was left with a family legacy of a business that was around for 25 years. And not only that, but had such a reputation in our industry, right? And I came in with an education and with understanding and having grown up in that. So understanding our consumer, understanding our our clientele, and understanding where we sit in the market, as much as it was evolving and changing, that there was just something in me that was like, 10 years from now, if you look back and you didn't decide to do this, would you have regretted it? And I said, absolutely. And so that's when I took over, and it was a lot of challenges in the first 5 years, for sure. It was.
Well, I want to get into that, but I want to just share, I love what you just said, because I think a lot of people have to make really big decisions in their life, and how do you make those big decisions? And you just mentioned, you said, well, I thought about 10 years from now, would I regret that I didn't do this? And that was what helped you. And I love that, because I think there's even something out there like 1, 5, 10, right? What would you think in 1 year? What would you think in 5 years? What do you think in 10 years? And you know, my kids would listen to this and be like, I always say, make decisions that give you the most optionality. You know, if you have multiple decisions, which one's the most optionality? But also, when you visualize yourself, like, would you ever regret it? And I think that's an amazing advice to people who have to make really tough decisions. And also, I imagine it was scary because there's like these expectations. It's like when you start something from scratch, it's all about you, and if you fail yourself, which, you know what, that's part of it. But I imagine, and that's enough pressure, but I imagine like the pressure of stepping into the family legacy and the fact that you made the decision because you wanted to maintain the family legacy. That must have been really hard at 22.
It definitely was, and especially taking over a family legacy, but also one that has been around for so long, and then having the pressure, like you said, of maintaining that reputation, but then also not being afraid to continue to push forward, right? And I truly believe that because of the example that I had from both of my parents of resiliency and just you go after what you want and what you believe you can achieve, I think part of it was naivety, and I think you need a little bit of that. You need to be a little bit naive or a little bit crazy out of the box to really be an entrepreneur, to be a leader, right? It's not everyone can be an entrepreneur. You're definitely not a normal person, let's be honest, right? So you need a little something in you, and I think part of it is sometimes you make decisions even knowing, as scary as it was and as pressure as it was, I didn't really know. I was 22 years old, right? So I think a little bit of it is naivety and just one step at a time, you know, one foot in front of the other, and you will make it through. I had very, very dark days in my first 5 years, things that a 22-year-old should not be dealing with, you know, in terms of our business.
So can you maybe share, I mean, one of the questions I really wanted to ask you was just, there were people who worked for your dad, now you're stepping in and they're working for you, you know, things that you kept, things that you changed, you know, some of the biggest challenges from that time.
I didn't keep much. I came in, and I won't lie, I let everybody go, and I had to start from scratch because I was coming into a business that was so established already, but in the last couple of years, it was not what I remember it being, right? And so I walked in not knowing so much, but what I did know is that this isn't working. And so I was like, in order for me to understand, in order for me to also build my own, I can't go in and gain the respect of someone who's 40 years old and has been doing this for us for 3, 4, 5 years. And quite honestly, has been doing it in a way where I think can be done better. And so I looked at my dad and I was like, this is what we're gonna do. We gotta start all of it from scratch. And that's what we did. I kept my warehouse manager, who had been with us at that point for 19 years, is never gonna let go of him. And we kept our bookkeeper, who till today is with us as well. She works remotely, obviously, from New York. Those two people have been with us, had been with my dad since I was very, very young. And so I kept them as my sense of security and safety and you know, BH, that we still have them. And the rest, I really just, I had to deconstruct it in order to know how to build it back up.
Was it really hard to let those people go? And did you have your dad let them go, or you actually went in and did that?
I don't remember. I think a few of them I had to let go. But the ones that were closer to working with my father, where he worked with them on a weekly basis, more like the buyers and merchandisers and our web team, he was letting go of those people. So at least he helped me with that. And then once that happened, it was really all mine to kind of figure out from there. And it was hard. Hiring, like we just discussed, is extremely hard, especially in New York, especially in retail, and especially during that time. And I think also for me, I came into this business so young and I was so hungry. I was just so hungry to build and to expand and to just make an impact. And I know, because I watched it my whole life, how fun shopping can be and how fun retail can be, and what we provide that woman that is just beyond what she's walking out with, you know? And I wanted that to transcend beyond just our store, beyond just our brick and mortar. Like you know, it's so funny, in this past year, I'm so grateful. And my husband, even yesterday, when I told him, you know, I can't wait for the podcast today, he said to me, you know, something you've said so often this year is that so many things that you had goals for and that you used to dream of in your first 5 years, you've achieved so many of them in this last year. And it's really true, you know, like special things take time. But if you believe that you will get there, you will get there, you know. And I was so young, and to be achieving everything I have in my early 30s, to me is such a huge accomplishment. You know, some people are like, oh, you have to do it in your 20s. You have to do it at your own pace. And Hashem will always direct you in the right direction when the time is right.
You know, I'm just like smiling ear to ear because I think people look at, I've said this before, they look at successful people and they think that, oh my gosh, they think it's just overnight. Everything just goes well. Yes. And you're really talking about your 10th year. And you're like 9 years of building, and now my 10th year is where I'm actually finally achieving it. And nobody thinks it's going to take that long. I always say when you have an idea, figure double the time, double the money, and then you put COVID in the middle, which we're going to talk about, which I could appreciate. I want to have that conversation with you because I also, my business was destroyed from COVID too, and we really could have just shut down and decided that we were not going to do that and had to rebuild from there. But before we get there, because I think it's just so fascinating to me, the early years that you took. Did your dad go back to Israel and you were alone in New York and you really had independence, or he was really still there? It was like completely yours. He's like, I'm out, do what you want.
He was so out to a point where I think it was like 3 years into taking over, I actually got a life coach because I was like, I need somebody to talk to. Yeah. And I remember my life coach after a few sessions was like, bring your dad. And I said, my dad is never going to do this. He's Israeli. Like, he's not going to sit here and have this conversation. And he did, which I was so surprised and grateful for. And he said to me then, he said, you do what you want to do with the business. You want to not open the store for a day? I am so out of this business.
He like gave you permission to
like do what you need to do.
Did that take pressure off for you?
No.
Okay.
Gave me all the pressure.
Because he trusted you.
He trusted me, yes. Yeah. But it definitely, I think it took the pressure that I had on myself off a little bit in realizing that I think for me, it's like we're a business and we are a brick and mortar and you have to be open. There's no 7 people call out, someone still needs to open the store. Yeah. And I think that he really positioned it for me. And he said this to me when I decided to take over the business. So 3 years before that, when we were sitting there, that he said, you just have to remember, and this is another tip I have. We are in retail. We are in sales. You are not saving lives. You are not, no one's life depends on it. You are not a lawyer and you're not a doctor. Everything will be okay. The challenges that you think are so big between this pink and that pink will be resolved by tomorrow. Just take it easy and focus on the things that really need attention. And I think that was where I needed the reminder 3 years later, where he really showed me in a different way. It's like, these problems are not that big. If you have to close the store because 7 people call out and you're sick in bed, you're not gonna come in sick to the store. Close the store. And for me, that was so strange to hear because I'm like, we're a open business. What do you mean close the store? And I never did, but I think just hearing that again from him really, it put me back into that same mindset that I needed to hear, especially when I had been doing that at that point for 3 years. I had just renovated the store. That was also a disaster that he let me do on my own. I have no idea how or why. And so it was just a lot of challenges that culminated, and hearing that again, it really just brought me back to the first few days of when I had when I had taken over the business.
2 quick questions about that time period, and then we're going to move on. Number 1, the biggest mistake from those first 5 years.
You know, and maybe people hate this answer, but I think it's so hard for me to come up with a mistake because I genuinely don't. I think all mistakes are really lessons that you learn. I don't think anything was a mistake because everything that I went through, all the hardships, are why I'm able to sit here a year ago, 2 years ago even, and recognize how great of a place our business is in because we went through so many of those hardships, and also being able to see and look back and be like, wow, you really did push through. Like 7 years ago, you were there wondering, what are you gonna do? How are you gonna survive? COVID then came, all of these things, and you wonder, this employee did this happened here, and you realize that you are strong enough to just have resilience. It's all about resiliency. I think leadership, especially, but entrepreneurship, it's about resiliency. Even you mentioning that you guys also during COVID, and so many businesses that have survived, we were all under that same, we don't know what's happening. The world didn't know what was happening, right? And it's really, really just digging so deep into your power and knowing that you are in the right place and that you just need to keep going.
Not to quit, right? Just don't quit.
Not to quit, you know, you have to survive it.
So one more question for you. I love that you said that everything was an experience that built on, because I do agree, it's like these layers, and the things that you do that are, you know, failures, mistakes, whatever anyone wants to call them, are challenges. They're things that you really ultimately, you get through them and you learn from them, and it prepares you for the things that come. They're building blocks. Yeah. Nobody walks in with no building blocks. Exactly. That's how you do it. So I guess I'll rephrase the question to, what was the biggest thing you learned in those first 5 years that took you, and I know you talked quite a bit about some different, but is there one specific thing that you could think of that was the biggest building block for you to take with you to today?
I truly think that one of my biggest things was to listen to your gut. And I know we always say that, and we tell ourselves that, and we tell our friends that, and our family and people that we love, but I think it's so hard to remember in the moments where you're challenged to listen to your gut. And even when I was making the choice to take over the business or not, it was really listening to what was inside of my heart and knowing that that will surpass anything else. Like, if you really listen to your instinct, it's your instinct. No one can deny it. It's not a right or wrong answer, right? It's all lessons that we've learned. And so that's where your instinct went. You learned a lesson. Maybe it's not the result you wanted. Great. So now you know, and your instinct will change the next time this happens. And so that, I definitely think, you know, in my first 5 years, I really break it up between the first 5 years and the most recent 5 years. And now in the last 5 years, I will always listen to my instinct. Even if my mind is telling me something else, it's like, but that's your instinct. And you learn in the first 5 years, when you didn't listen to it, you saw what happened.
So I love that. I want to challenge one thing around it. Often people, their instinct, they sometimes there's fear or even greed, but I think for most entrepreneurs it's fear. That sometimes there's a fear that they're confusing with their instinct.
I was about to say, but that's not your instinct, that's your mind.
Right. So what is your tip to being able to distinguish between, am I feeling this way because I'm scared, or am I feeling this way because truly it's like my instinct that this is the right thing to do?
For me, it's always, how would you feel if you didn't try? If you didn't try to do whatever you think is the right solution, or this idea that you want to pitch, how would you feel if you didn't do that? For me, it would be in my head until I did it. So at some point I will have to listen to my instinct. And you have to wait for the right time. Sometimes you listen to your instinct or you listen to your gut and you realize that it was great, it's what you imagined, but it didn't turn out exactly how you anticipated, right? And so with everything that people experience, it's building blocks also, right? Every experience that you have, whether it's a good experience or it's a challenging experience, everything brings you to that next step, to that next day, to that next situation, right? And so I do something similar. I think about, okay, let's say, you know, we'll take your example, which we're going to go to is, we'll take your example, which is, should I take over, you know, a store? And so in that situation, similar, I think about, okay, how will I feel if I'm successful, right? So if the fear is saying not to do it, then I think about, okay, but if I'm successful, would I still feel the same way? And if I would, then I know it's not coming from fear. Right. But if I wouldn't, and I know, no, that would be great, but only if it's successful, then I knew that was like a fear-based driving me. So those are both two really great, because I do think that it's natural for somebody to be afraid, to try. And so many people get stuck in like places they never become everything they could be because they're scared. They're scared what other people are going to think of them. They're scared to let people down. They're scared for themselves. But if you give yourself permission to know that they're going to be building blocks and it's only going to be a part of doing something more and more, and unleash it, you have one life to live, just go for it and try. And what's the worst case scenario? And you know what? Surround yourself with people who are cheering you on,
who believe in you.
So that's what I was going to say is the other thing is you have to mute the outside voices, whether it's your family, it's your partner, it's your best friend, you have to mute the voices. You have to listen to your instinct. The more opinions you ask of people, the more divided you become in your own instinct and knowing is that my instinct, is that my mind, who is playing tricks on me, you know? So absolutely, and I love that tip.
I also love, I just heard it recently, I love the tip of don't even care what anyone says to you, unless it's somebody you would go to ask advice for, then don't even listen when they critique you, when they put you down, like they're irrelevant. But only the people who you respect enough to go ask advice from are the people that actually what they say has to matter. So I thought that was great. All right, so now we're gonna get to COVID, which I know is like a tough, and I want to just hear about sort of what happened. I know exactly because it's February of 2020. I will never forget those moments for myself. But of course, at that time, none of us knew. We thought it could be a week. We thought it could be 2 weeks. So where were you in the business at that point, and what was that like?
So February, like any winter months in New York, is very tough. It's the worst months in retail. So I remember it was the dead of February. It was right after Valentine's Day. And we had a custom leather jacket pop-up event that we were doing that weekend. And it was the weekend, I think we found out about COVID on Tuesday. It was that weekend before. So we had this amazing event. You know, it was like the most traffic we had in all of February because nobody's trying to escape the cold. It was so busy, so amazing. And I remember packing it up, and the next day, Monday, I remember already starting to hear things, not in the US, but just in general. And we're like, okay, nothing. And then I think it was Tuesday, we all got the news, like, you can't leave the house. And I remember looking at my now husband, my then boyfriend, being like, I'm out of a day job. Like, I have nothing to do. And I'm like, I've never lived one day not knowing. I went from being a student, I took a week off to have my graduation trip, and then I took over the business. I've never had vacation of like mind vacation. I had no idea what to do. I was like, there's nothing to buy. There's nothing to send back. No one's taking it. No, I'm like, there's literally, I had nothing to do. I would open my computer every day. I'm like, okay, I don't know. At that time, we didn't have online either. And so, and we also didn't know how long this was going to last, right? So the first few weeks were, I think for everybody during COVID, we just didn't know. It was kind of like, okay, it's fun, but it's also like, okay, we have a business, I have rent to pay, I have people I don't know how long this is going to be to even know how to start to construct solutions, right? And then when we realized it was going to be much longer and we were on lockdown, that's when I started to really get creative and scrappy. And I think especially in business and an entrepreneur, when you are limited in your resources, you get very creative. You're forced to get very creative. So it could be resources as in you don't have a big enough team to do everything that the business needs on a daily basis. It could be financial resources. You don't have a true brick or mortar, whatever it is. The less amount of resources you have, it kind of takes you back to the first days where you started your own business, right? And you were doing everything and you were wearing all the hats. And while I didn't have that, that was my time to have that. And COVID was so interesting. It ended up being a time where when I look back at it, and it's very strange to say because of all the detriment that happened from COVID, for me in my career personally, it was the best thing that happened. I was able to get out of a 30-year lease where he was never going to let me leave. We were grandfathered into that lease, and he would never let me go. And COVID was that opportunity that I was allowed to do that. I was able to do that. And at first, my dad was not willing to let me kind of try to find a way to, get out of that. And I didn't even have a plan. I didn't think I was going to move to Miami. I didn't think I was going to go online. I just was like, this doesn't serve us and we need to let go of this. We need to cut off the dead weight. We reopened from COVID. I had nothing to do. I didn't have a team. I didn't have anything. It was just me in the store. And I would see maybe one person a day once we reopened. And then I launched online with my best friend, just like in my living room.
Can I ask you, how did you pay your bills during this time? Like you had all the payroll, you had all the, like, did you have to use like savings? Did you have like cash flow? Like that's so hard.
So yes, that's a great question. So to be very transparent, our rent in Miami, they were very good to us. Also, Miami was not closed for so long. It was maybe closed for
Wait, you had opened already in Miami?
Miami was open since 2008.
So before we get to talking about COVID, your father had 2 stores. It wasn't just New York, but also in Miami. So you've kind of talked a lot about the store in New York and everything going in New York, but how did you also manage Miami if you were in New York?
Yeah, so it's funny. So we are originally from New York. My dad opened our first location in 1990. We expanded in New York to 5 different locations. So we had multiple. And then in 2008, funny enough, right before the stock market crashed, they opened up a Miami location as well in what was the Gansevoort and is now the One Hotel. So we have been in the same location since 2008. We waited out for the buyout and the reconstruction, and that's when we opened our pop-up in the Hamptons. And we moved the entire Miami team to the Hamptons. And then we came back once the store was ready again, and it was opened up as the One Hotel in, I believe it was 2013, around that time.
Okay, so when you take over, you're not just taking over one store. You were really taking over a brand that had multiple locations, and so when you talked about that you let everybody go, you had all these locations. So did you close certain locations when you took it over?
No.
So how did you do that?
What I mean, letting everybody go, I mean more so in our office and more in sort of the back end, the administrative side, yes, okay. Because I grew up in the stores and I grew up just helping them sell. I really was kind of like the denim folder for every location, or like the backstock girl. I would always organize, but I was always client facing and I was always with the merchandise on the sales floor. And so for me, it was really reconstructing the back end of the business that I had no idea what that looked like, to be able to go in and fire off directions, right? And be able to inspire and lead these teams. And so with our brick and mortars, we had at the time in 2015 when I took over, we had Soho, which was our flagship. We had the Upper West at that time as well. And we had Miami. And within my first few years, I had closed our Upper West Side location. That was a very challenging conversation because I had gone to our landlord at the time after, I think we were open for maybe 4 years, and it's just me, 22-year-old, sitting with this big shot landlord asking him to break my lease. And I remember him being like, your dad was smart in letting you come to this meeting, because I would have said no to him. And in the end, he let us close, which was very nice. It was very peaceful. And so I closed that within my...
Can I ask you, what's a technique if somebody's in that situation and they need to get out of a lease? What is your suggestion on that?
My suggestion in anything is over communication and being honest. At the end of the day, business is business and livelihood is livelihood. I cannot pay you the rent. I'm not making enough money. You can rent this out to somebody else that can give you a good business, right? You don't want to hear from me every month or every 6 months. Sell it to somebody else, lease it to somebody else. It just doesn't make sense. And I think sometimes people are like, we don't want to be so honest, or we don't, but you have to be honest sometimes. People need to know, like, it's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's business. You know, there's so many ups and downs. I mean, I've seen Big Drop be on Times Square on billboards, on the taxi cabs for years. You know, we were so big at one time, and then I also saw us become this small. But it's a matter of being honest and knowing that there's those ups and downs, and you have to communicate. And I always say this with my team, also over communicate, because it's never as bad as you actually think. It really isn't. And listen, it wasn't the same. It wasn't as easy with the other landlord in our Spring Street location we had been with for 30 years at that point. But I kept going and I kept going, and I would repeat myself every couple months. To one point, he's like, all right, I'm done listening to you. Just give me the keys and go.
That's amazing.
You know, it's resilience. You have to, and I think especially in fashion, which yes is retail, but I think in fashion there is this fantasy, right? It's fashion. I'm not selling. We're selling a fantasy, right? It's a dream of a woman who wants to feel like she is associated to, or she represents that, whether it's the brand or it's the item that she's wearing. You know, it's also when you put on a certain piece of clothing, it takes you and transforms you into a different version of yourself. And sometimes it's a version of yourself you didn't even know existed. And I think it's so important to still realize that while you are in fashion and you are living this fantasy and you are creating this fantasy, it's still a business at the end of the day, and you have responsibilities for your staff, for your family, for myself. And if I am in a place where I can't, whether it's a brand that I can't continue with, or it's a landlord that this just doesn't make any more sense, I think honesty is just the best way to go, because I think people discredit it sometimes and they're like, oh no, it's just too honest. They're not gonna, how are you gonna argue with the fact that it's just not a right business decision for you to keep me here, right? If you go in with logic, and that's also what I always say, if you go in with logic, it's so hard to counter the logic.
I also think too, is you talked about the business was big, the business is small. You never know what other businesses you're getting into. When you hold yourself at a level of integrity, when you have a reputation that you are someone who is good to do business with, who's honest to do business with, that is way better. That is going to get you way farther than worrying that, wait, someone will never do business with me anymore because I failed or this location and I can't pay, and therefore I'm embarrassed about it and they'll never want to work with me again. I actually think it's the opposite, right? I think when you're sneaky or you try and you, like, people see through that, and then they won't work with you again. They may let you out also, but you could accomplish where you need to accomplish and keep your integrity for the long term. And also, like, you have to live with yourself. Like, business is business at the end of the day, and you have to live with yourself.
100%, absolutely.
So now I want to take us to COVID. So we have a store in Miami, we have stores in New York, and we don't have an online presence. And you are home, and you are home for already, a couple of weeks. Like, what am I doing? There's nothing to do, and you have your creative juices starting. So what happens?
So the first thing I did, because also in my first 5 years where I was met with so many challenges and obstacles, I really never had an opportunity to sit and just think, what does my business need and what do I need to do? I was always reacting to what was happening in the business and putting out fires for consecutively 5 years. And I think as an entrepreneur, you never stop doing that, right? You hire people to run your business. At the end, you're the one that's dealing even more so with the fires that you need to put out, right? Yeah. The high level fires. And it was the first time where I was able to sit there and really sit there and just have infinite time and thinking, what have I always wanted to do that I never had time for? And what do I think my business needs in order to A, survive this, and B, also have an impact beyond COVID. And the first thing was digital. It was online and it was social. And those were two things that I had interest in. It was not my passion in any way in terms of that I know how to do these things, but I knew that this is where the world is. And especially with COVID, I had to get with it, right? And the realization really came to me when I started to do virtual shopping appointments. This is kind of how our live shopping or our virtual shopping appointments came to life, where it was the third day of lockdown, and I was like, I have so much merchandise. What do I do? How do I offload this? And my dad was like, just wait, like there'll be time. Like I can't wait, because the second we open, then all the brands are going to want to ship new merchandise. And so I put the entire store, I think it was like 30-40% off, and I started reaching out to all of my top clients that I have relationships with, that I continuously have a conversation with them. And I said, if you have any time, if you're looking to shop for anything, I'm doing everything 30-40% off. We can do a virtual appointment, however you want to do it. And the response that I got, I was so surprised, because we had never done anything like this. I didn't even know how I was really going to format this. I was just kind of offering, like, let's do a FaceTime appointment. And it blew up. I had sorority groups that were stuck in their sorority houses doing group FaceTimes, happy hour FaceTimes, like 3 friends in a place doing it with the other 3 friends, and we're all on the FaceTime together. It really just grew through word of mouth. And that's when I realized that I need online solely for the purpose for these clients to be able to transact easily. Whereas before I was doing it very manual and sending them photos of things and photo of the register and of the toilet. And it was like, this is not the experience I want to give my client. I'm not looking for her to now do work. And so that was what motivated me to really sit there and launch her online. It was really just so that they could check out. And so my best friend, who also was on lockdown and has helped me with everything in my business, she's like, okay, let's do it. And so she went from one end of the inventory and I went from the other end. And then at some point we met in the middle. I launched our online, and I remember a week later, I got a huge order. I think it was like $5,000. And I remember seeing this order and being like, oh my God, Clay, it's fraud. This is my boyfriend at the time, my now husband. I'm like, oh my God, Clay, it's fraud. I don't know. How did they find the website? Like, what's this fraud? And then I was like, okay, I don't know. She's buying our private label. And I'm like, the private label is exclusive to Big Drop. So I'm like, if you're going to spend that much money on our private label, you have to know us from somewhere. Yeah. So I went on our Instagram, like, does she know us from there? I couldn't find her. Then I went to our POS system, and then I had seen she had shopped with us before. So I was like, okay, it's not fraud. And so then I called her And I was, and again, I was very honest, and I was just so excited. I was like, you don't understand, this is my family business. I just launched my website. At first I thought this was fraud. I'm so happy. Like, how did you discover us? How did you even find our website? And she was like, oh, I've been a client of your guys for so long. I love your private label. I have 2 homes. I buy 2 of every single thing, and I put them each in a home. This is just my extra. And I was like, oh my gosh. And she is one of my best clients till this day. And that's kind of how I realized that this was working. And so I don't do email marketing. We don't do any Google ads. It's really, again, something that I'm learning as we go so that I can understand what the customer preferences are, especially with online growing so much. And then you have AI as well. And for us, we are a specialty boutique. I'm never going to be able to compete with the lifestyle shoots, the editorial shoots, these emails. I personally don't read emails. You could be my favorite retailer running a 50% off. I'm going to my promotions, I'm selecting all, and I'm deleting. So when I launched our website and I brought in a couple of years later someone to run our e-com, they were like, we need to do email marketing. So when was the last time you read an email? She's like, well, I don't read. I said, exactly. My client's definitely not. She's getting her information from social. That's where the investment needs. And so from then, after we reopened from COVID and I moved to Miami, my first hire was a social media manager, and that was what I was after, and people thought I was crazy.
How did you find it? I think that's one of the hardest things to find is a good social media manager.
It was Bashara. Yeah. It really was. She came into the store, I didn't know, and she posted something on her own Instagram of us. And so she tagged us, and at the time I was running our Instagram, and I always like to see people who follow. I'm like, are you a real person? Are you a bot? Where did you come from? Who do you know? And so I see this person and I click on her story, and then I just started to see her other content, and I started to watch her other stories. And in her stories, she had, I guess apparently just moved from New York and applied for a marketing role. She got it. And then it was kind of like a gimmick. It was like fraudulent, essentially. And so she was basically documenting the crazy experience that she had. They had her like in a parking lot, like doing, it was crazy. And then her last story was like a question box. If any of like my followers, anyone in Miami knows anyone that's hiring for marketing or social media, please connect me. And I literally went in, responded, I said, me, with the hand emoji, I said, me, I am. And then we connected, and I found out that earlier that day, the reason she came into our store was because one of our old sales reps, an assistant of hers, I guess is somewhat friends with my now social media manager, and told her like, hey, if you're in Miami, like you should stop by at Big Drop, like you'll love them, see if someone's there, maybe Malka's there, and like you can talk to her and see. I wasn't there. This old assistant did not tell me this. I had no idea of any of this, and Bianca and I started to connect the dots 2 months later. And that's why she came into the store. That's why she posted on our Instagram. And then I just started watching it, and that's how it.
So I think it's such a great story. And I think so much in business happens like that. How much do you attribute? Because when I was really in my early days as an entrepreneur, and really up until I would say for me COVID, I just was like, okay, if I work hard enough, I could will it into existence. Like just work hard and I'll get wherever I need to go, just like push. And like something changed for me during COVID where, yes, you have to do your work, you have to work hard, like, but there's also certain things that just, like that they're meant to be or they're not meant to be, right? And so for me, like I say, you do your hishtadlut, right? Like that's, but once you've done what you could do, and if you're pushing and something is not moving, like fine, you're working hard and it's slow. I was just talking about this with my son the other night. I was like, he's like, when do you know? I said, well, if you're working really hard and it's continuing to move, that's one thing. But if you're working really hard and it's just like a brick wall and you just keep hitting it, you keep hitting it, you really have to look at it and say, number one, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Or two, is it like, okay, I have to try something, but I'm talking about you try something different, you do, but like sometimes just like this maybe just not meant to be. And then there's things that could just fall into your lap. And I've shifted that a little bit as I've learned is, trust me, I work incredibly hard, but I'm not trying to will things into existence anymore. I'm gonna work at something hard, and then if I'm also willing to accept, okay, if it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be, or if it's meant to be, it'll happen. If not, I'll be okay and I'll do something different. And I used to just be like, this is what needs to happen, exactly like this. I just need to work. If it's not going, harder and harder and harder and make sure I get there.
I think that is one of the biggest skills of a successful entrepreneur, and more so a successful leader, is having the balance between knowing when to push hard and have that resilience, but also knowing when things are just not meant to be and knowing to accept that and recognize it and let go of it. There's so many things that I have wanted to do where I realized either this doesn't make sense and it's not meant to be, or it's just not meant to be right now. And you have to accept that and move on from that, right? And if it's meant to be, it will be revisited again and those paths will cross. But that mindset, it really transcends into leadership, right? And it shows your team, I think it shows a very important skill and quality of knowing how to sometimes let go. And I think it's very important because I see so many of our brand owners and they have big businesses and I watch them just go after these ideas that they have. And I'm like, where's like the plan, not the planning, but like, where's the like logic in this idea? Where does, it's just your idea and you're creative and you want to do, but where's the impact that it's, you know, like where's the infrastructure? Where's the, and sometimes you just, and that's a creative, right? And that's their beauty and that's also sometimes their detriment. But being a leader, I think it's so important to have that balance of knowing how to just push, and then also knowing when it's appropriate to take a step back.
And I think I totally agree with you. And I think part of that, which you were just talking about, is some people just say, I've got a great idea for a business. Is the most, all the time people come to me and they're like, I have this great idea for a business. And they're telling me and they're so excited about it. And then I say, okay, well, let's say, how much of it do you have to sell and at what price point? They're like, I don't know, but I know it's gonna be successful. I'm like, do you even know that you can make money for it? Do you know that you won't lose money? And it's like that piece, which is you have an amazing idea. And so what you're talking about, you have an amazing idea, whether it's for adding it to your existing company or starting a new company, it's taking that extra step to be able to say, okay, I have this idea, making sure people are going to buy it, right? Before you build it, go make sure. And I said, just go to one of your customers. If you're ready, go to your customers and say, I have this idea. Would you buy it at this price? Right, well, how much would you pay for it? And you make sure you have enough people. And a lot of times you learn that they wouldn't, or you learn that you can't sell enough to be able to cover the cost or to be worth it, or for you potentially to take that same energy and put it someplace else. And I think one of the biggest reasons that people go out of business is because they have great ideas, but they don't put on paper sort of what it takes to make sure that idea is successful. And they just will learn as they go. And there is a lot to learn as you go, but that's one of those things. So I want to take back a little bit. This is such a fascinating, I love the conversation, and I hope that people are just, I'm learning so much from you, and I'm just so enjoying like the different tips, and I think you can apply it in so many different ways. But I want to hear a little bit more on when you decided to close the store in New York. What was the decision around that, and then to focus everything in Miami and in online?
Yeah, so I won't lie, it was the easiest hard decision to make, just because it was even before COVID, a couple years before, where I was already looking to close that location. Like I had mentioned, Soho was very different. It was just a different climate. And I didn't feel like our power was really shown in Soho anymore, and in New York in general. And so closing that store was very easy for me in the sense that I knew that it would cut off the dead weight and it would allow me to really prosper and explore. With that, though, it was very scary because I was coming into Miami, and of course I've been to the store, I would come every year. It's just a completely different landscape, different clientele.
How do you know what to buy for your different markets?
You have to know your client, you know, and so much of the reason why I am so good at what I do, and even why Lily is so good at what she doesn't own the business, right? She didn't grow up in it. We are in the store. We see what our clients want. There's so much you can learn from reports, yes, but those businesses that are banking off of their reports, where's Intermix, where's Saks, you know, like where's Scoop? They all went out of business, right? You have to have your pulse, and especially with COVID and what's happened in the last few years, you cannot run your business off of reports. It's great and it's a great benchmark, but you have to know innately where your customer is going, how she's evolving, and you need to meet her there before she's there.
I love
that. And that's the secret.
Okay, so then how do you take that and grow it from there, right? So if you have one location, so do you open up more locations? Do you grow the e-commerce? Once you get to so many locations, then you wind up in that same situation? Like, how do you grow the business from here?
I'll let you know when I figure it out. No, I think like you said, there's so many different channels, and I think that goes back to, and that's the fun part of entrepreneurship, it's what do you want to do? What makes you happy, and where do you feel like your impact will will yield the most results, right? And so for us right now, it's in a lot of those things that you mentioned. Like I said, I'm very hungry for a lot of things. And so we are looking to open more brick and mortars to continue to give that experience that the clients are looking for from us. And also really developing our digital strategy and our online presence. Those are kind of our two big pillars, as well as wholesaling our private label, which we've had for about 13, 15-ish years. We just relaunched it last year as its own brand identity. It's separate to Big Drop, and we're looking to really wholesale that this year.
What do you see as the future of retail?
I see it very much experiential. Yeah, I see it very much experiential. I see it really becoming more so of a lifestyle, kind of how it used to be, more so of an activity. I think people are finding that joie de vivre again in their retail and in their shopping, and people are also shopping much smarter than they used to be, right? They are understanding, I think, more their power in where their spending power and how that does drive business, and how they are a big catalyst to businesses that are surviving and not, right? And so continuing to offer the client these experiences. So for example, we have an event where we have the designer coming in from the brand to meet our clients, to have a meet and greet, kind of styling with the designer. And then we take some of our VIPs to a VIP experience after, where they're able to share an intimate, whether it's a sit-down dinner, sit-down lunch, or just an evening with this designer and this brand that they have been supporting for so many years, right? And in the last 10 years, with influencer marketing growing so much, where I think it is so powerful, and I think that there's so much of a need for that, and it's a different way of doing advertising, right? In the same token, for us, it was never something that was so organic in terms of we have so many inbounds, and even till this day, we have so many inbound people interested, but it just doesn't really make sense for us. We're a multi-brand retailer, and so it's not that you're promoting my brand, right? Even if you're tagging Big Drop, that doesn't, and you're just asking for free stuff, right? Yeah. My intention is, again, to continue to build that relationship with the client, and I think it's such a missed opportunity to not be doing as much as you invest in influencers. Do that for the clients. They're the ones that have built your business to what it is now. And I don't even mean my business included, but to the brands we carry.
So let's talk about brands for a minute. How do you, if you want to open a store in retail or you want to expand, it's hard to get the brands. Like how, just share a little bit of tips around the brands.
We're very lucky in that we do have a reputation. We've been in the industry for so long, and so we do get a lot of inbound interest of brands that are well known, brands that we have maybe carried in the past that we don't carry anymore, and also of course new and emerging designers. It really comes down to you knowing the client, and you knowing the client if you already have a business, or knowing where you want to sit in the market and what kind of clothes you want to have, what style you want to have, what price point you want to have if you are starting a new business, and continuing to build off of that. So for brands that are not reaching out to us and that we want to reach out to them and connect with them.
But if you were starting, if I didn't have the reputation that you have, what would be your tip to
It's the same thing as even if you do have the reputation, you just it's like guerrilla marketing. You have to find them on LinkedIn, on Instagram, find them on Facebook. It's really that people think it's this beautiful, well curated. No, you just go find them. You go knock on someone's door, you find someone that you used to work with that could maybe know them, and it's really just through that. And
so you got to be pretty gritty, not just on getting the clients in the door, but also getting the brands into your store. That's super interesting.
And then they'll respond to you and be like, yes, this is great. And then it's a matter of distribution. You can't just carry a brand because you have money to buy the brand. They also have requirements. A lot of brands don't like to sit in different retailers so close to each other. So a lot of people will come into our store and be like, why don't you carry XYZ, which are brands that if you look at our assortment, you would assume we have them. And it's not because we don't want them, trust us. It's because we can't get them because of distro issues usually, especially in Miami, which is most of the boutiques are so close to each other.
I love it. Well, I love all of the tips. I love the whole story. I want to just talk for a couple minutes about you. You're married and you have a son. What changed for you when you became a mom?
I think for me, what changed was that I was able to let go a little bit more, which is something that I definitely yearned for in the years prior to that. And it really allows you to step back and see the bigger picture. And even more so to what my dad told me when I took over the business, of that whatever challenges you are experiencing, they're not as big as you think. And so when I had a son, I think it really transcended into my leadership, where I'm definitely more lenient, but I don't mistake the leniency for weakness, right? I think it's a matter of people that are entrepreneurs, or people that look at entrepreneurs, they always, or business owners, they're always like, they have to be so tough and they have to be mean, especially women. And it's like, you have to be a, B word. It's like, you really don't. You really don't. You can kill them with kindness. People do respect that. And especially being young, taking over the business, that was very hard in the beginning. And I don't think I was really allowed to be so soft. And then when I had my son and I was in New York and I had established the team that we have now, it was celebrated and it was welcomed. And I had a team that I knew I could trust in allowing myself to let go more, and that nothing would change. And if anything, it allowed them more opportunity to grow, right? And to grow their skill set and their ownership over their responsibilities, and just grow within our brand as well.
Love it. That's awesome. Okay, here's a big question for you. What's the legacy that you want to leave behind for your son, for the store, for yourself?
I want to recreate the in-store experience for shopping. I think for me it's so important because I grew up in the 90s and the early 2000s where shopping was so fun. And being able to show women that you can completely change your entire energy, confidence level with the right clothing that fits for your lifestyle, for your body type, that is such a huge skill. The majority of women that come into our store, style or not, money or not, they don't know what works for their body. And then you give them something and it's like, it's this whole world unlocks for them beyond just the amazing pants that they put on. It's like, oh my God, I am this person, and transcending that to the masses and really being able to have women experience that. Like in this last year especially, it's so beautiful. Every single day that you're at Big Drop, you have clients that come in and give you anecdotes on how amazing we made them feel and how amazing they felt, and they look back and they think, oh my God, that was the best time I ever had. That's what I want. I want people to be happy. I want women to be celebrated, to be happy, and to be able to provide them those tools to see that magic in themselves is all I could ask for. And that's what I hope my son and my husband, my future kids can see that mom does. Mom makes other women more confident and really shines the light on them.
I love that. And you said this last year was really 9 years of building, and this year, what happened in this last year that has taken the store 9 years to get to?
So much happened.
Biggest highlight?
I think for me, it was really cultivating the team that we have. I was an only child for so much of my life, and I was a child of divorced parents, and so my best friends have always been my family, and my team is my family. I see all of them as my kids, and to have the team that we have going into this year, and then only adding to that, and not having things be replaced where one leaves and then you replace with another great one. We're growing. Walking in and knowing that you have this team behind you, for me, is something that is why we've been able to flourish and do everything else, right? Like these events, you can have a great idea. If you don't have the team that knows how to continue your vision and really bring that to life, it doesn't happen as you would hope, right?
It's almost like, it's like, and in order to be able to cultivate a great team, you have to be able to cultivate yourself as that leader. And so it takes that time. So I have my fast 5 questions but usually I ask the question, what would you tell your younger self? The way I want to ask it to you is, what would you tell yourself, that 22-year-old self, when you were just about to take over the store? If you tell one thing, what would you tell that younger self of yours at 22?
I would tell her that as wild as her dreams are, she's going to achieve much more than that. I think that's what I would tell her, and to not worry. I carry a lot of responsibility, and I've always honored it, and I love it, and I don't think about it so much, but at the end of the day, I carry a lot of responsibility in terms of my family, and that's where a lot of the worry came from. And now looking back and seeing that I was able to provide my dad and his wife and my siblings now a life for them through taking over this business and going through those challenges is something that I think that's the thing I'm most proud of.
It's beautiful.
You know.
What would you say is your superpower?
Oh. My superpower is that I am extremely empathetic to people. I feel their feelings and their emotions, I think, far more than they do. And sometimes it's to my own detriment, especially as a leader. But I think also it really, truly is what sets me apart. I think so many entrepreneurs, business owners, especially women, like I said, are so strict and so tight and have to really show up. And we do. It's very challenging to sit there in a boardroom as a woman is not an easy thing. And so it's something that we're almost conditioned to, right? It's like a shield that we've innately created for ourselves. But breaking that down and having the balance of looking at my team like they are humans, and that's really what they are, and they are the heart of my business along with my clients, I think that is really the true magic in my leadership.
Love it.
I would hope.
What is one of the biggest sacrifices that you made that no one else saw?
So many. I think so many people don't realize how much you sacrifice as an entrepreneur, and it's very lonely, you know. And I more and more as I get older and as I talk to more entrepreneurs, I realize I'm not the only one, and that's how lonely it is. You don't even realize that the other people are just as lonely as you, and you sacrifice a lot. My 20s, I worked like I was in my 40s and my 50s. Like I'd never had a day off, even during my wedding week. I did not take time off. My phone was buzzing. I gave birth the morning of Monday. My dad called me, "Can we have payroll today?" No problem, David. Here you go. You sacrifice a lot, but at the same time, when you're doing something you love and that is your purpose, and even if some days you wake up and you're like, what is happening, right? In the bigger picture, if you realize and you believe you are doing what you're meant to be doing, it will all be okay in the end, you know? And I really, really believe that.
When you look back in this whole journey, if you could say the one most exciting moment that you had, what would you say that would be?
I will say that our 35th anniversary was probably the most exciting for me, because that was a celebration not only of everything my father achieved, right, but it was also a celebration of everything we've overcome in the last 10 years since I took over the business. And we celebrated it as an anniversary because it was a celebration. We are extremely successful and we were able to get through everything that we did, and to be able to celebrate that is so big. And we had so many of our clients, we had clients that flew in from the tri-state, and that to me shows the relationships that we've built with our clients, you know, that they're willing to take a flight for a birthday. And seeing so many of the people from our industry, from our Miami locals to our tri-staters, our New Yorkers, some talent, some celebrities that, you know, shop with us that also came. To see everybody in that space over our 35 years was so special to me. And it was the first time also that my dad came to an event. He doesn't really like to be, he's like, I'm an older man, it's not appropriate, you know. And he's Israeli, yes. And like, I understand. So he came, my brother came, which was also very important to me. And it's something that I continue to remind my dad. You know, my siblings and I have very different upbringings because they have siblings, they have each other, but they also, my dad he's retired, right? So they have a very different example at home. And I continue to remind my dad, I think as a parent also, you grow up with so much guilt especially as an entrepreneur, as a working parent in general. You grow up with a lot of guilt, and I didn't give them enough time, or they're here when they could be playing outside. And I continue to remind my dad, now that I have younger siblings, they're 8 and 10, so they're very young. I loved watching it, and it made me who I am. And so I want that for my siblings. And so the fact that he brought my brother, and my brother had the best time ever, was so special for me, because it really was like, this was such a big moment for the whole 35 years. It just culminated together.
I love that you said, I think there's a lot of guilt that sometimes parents think, but when you at least give the quality over quantity, you really are an inspiration to your kids about what it means to work hard, and watching you're a parent have the resilience to fail, that gives a child confidence that if it's okay if they fail too, and if they see everything being perfect, then they expect they're supposed to be that way, and they have no muscle, no tools to be able to deal with it themselves.
Exactly.
So final question is really just the opportunity to be able to leave whatever message you want with our listeners.
Oh, that's such a good one. It's so funny, I had thought of something for this and I can't remember. My biggest thing will be that Hashem creates us all in different ways. We are all our own person. We all have our own tools. And it's something my parents taught me when I was very young. You know, they were like, don't look at how we color the world with your own colors and your own tools. And that's what I would leave with our audience is find your true way to color the world, not somebody else's way. You can have the same color, but you're drawing it differently. And really valuing that, because there's so much comparison. Like comparison is, what is it, the thief of happiness, I think it's what it's called. And especially again, as women, it's really believing in that. And not only believing in that, but being confident in it. I think that's what it is. It's being confident in it and using that for the greater good in the world. It's okay that you're not doing what she's doing and that you're not at that point when you are at this age and she was, and you know, it's okay. Everybody has different tools and everybody is meant to do what they are meant to do.
Malka, thank you so much. I absolutely love this conversation. You have such a beautiful neshama. Like I just see it like pouring out, and it's incredible everything that you have achieved, and you're really an inspiration. There's a lot of women that are in retail, that want to go into retail and are struggling, and I really think that this episode is going to give them so much to think about.
Oh, thank you so much. Takes a good host. Thank you.
This episode was made possible by our friends at Roth & Co. We are grateful for their continued partnership. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and that you'll join us for the next one. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also watch this conversation on YouTube, so be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until we meet again, stay inspired to lead.